All right, so welcome to the first Couch Time with Cataya. And the first one that we're doing today is welcoming Claudine. And the reason for doing this today is a fun exploration that was coming up last year as an intuitive piece to land into around one of my most passionate pieces, which is knowing thyself, and to have an opportunity to drop into some core things that explain a little bit more about who we are on individual levels. So I'll let you do a little introduction to yourself, Claudine, so you can come into the space with everybody.
Hi, I'm Claudine Michaud, and I'm a business owner, and I have a small facial spa in Kitsilano, and opening a little shared healing space next door, just at 4th and Dunbar. It's going to be called Love and Peace. Opening up soon, fingers crossed.
Yeah. The work in progress with any big project, right? And the unfolding of how that all comes together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Definitely. Okay, so I really appreciate you being the first one to come in as an experiment to land into this together and to have some fun with this together.
Mm-hmm.
So I am open to which three things we're going to focus on today. And I'm going to cap it as well too. I did start my phone so that I make sure not to run too over in time, which is one of my quality traits as someone who's a big communicator. So the different traits we could land into. So I have your astrological birth time. So that's in both sidereal as well as tropical. So what that means is it's both the Eastern as well as the Western timing. And it gives a little bit of different information, and some of the houses and some of the placements are a little bit different in each chart, but it brings in a lot of highlights to different reasons why your life journey is what it is. And then we also have a certain aspect that I've studied, which is a connecting point that the old school way would have been phrenology and personology, which is actually going through a little bit of understanding the concept of how our facial features are actually formed, to understand aspects of our personality and how the personality actually forms. So it's actually a very powerful way to understand a little bit more of ourselves and how we actually show up in the world. And then I also have some dynamics around the aspects of name analogy and frequencies of name, as well as frequencies of your life birth path. So I'm going to let you tell me what's one of the core things that stands out that you would like to know a little bit about.
In terms of my life path?
In terms of a piece that really resonates for you that you'd like to know a little bit more about. Like one of the first ones that stands out as soon as I look at your facial features is I have like a highlight right away that really stands out.
Which is what? Tell me.
Okay, so so when we look at the face, there's all the different aspects that are coming through to how the features are formed. And one of the most classic ones, and it's a very common one that we see mostly with females, and when we go back to kind of the dynamic of the natural flow of the masculine versus the feminine, the dynamic of what it looks like for masculines to want to approach the feminine is we'll usually have, as females, a lot of the times we'll have a bit of a standoffishness where we're judging to a certain degree, or we are discerning, is maybe the better word, who it is that's coming into our world.
Yeah.
And so the way that that feature shows up is actually in the eyebrow. So the higher the placement of the eyebrow, the more space that somebody needs to be able to really get a chance to pick up on small character traits, pick up on the subtleties, pick up on the different energetic components, the empathic part of ourself coming forward to get a read of who somebody is. So typically when I see an eyebrow that's higher, and I have a bit of a higher eyebrow as well too, so I can really synergize with this component, is if you walk into a room full of people, you'll usually be someone who's going to stand back a little bit and you're going to observe and feel in to the energies of the people that are in the space. You're going to get a bit of a read and a bit of a internal dialogue that you're going to be tapping into. to who different people are and how you feel in regards to connecting in with different people. And after a time of discernment, then it's more of a it's a placement where it's actually a choice. Like that person, I can feel there's something very specific about them. That's someone I'm meant to connect in with. So it's a placement where there's it's creating a little bit of like an energetic buffer or a little bit of a boundary until you can synergize and drop in, because especially with some of your numbers as well, there's a dynamic where you're going to be more of a sensitive, you're going to be more of an empath, so you're going to feel more of an impact with the people you come into contact with. So that those pieces I can see right away, they dovetail together, where there is that need to have a bit of space to feel like, you know, who feels like they're energetically safe and who feels like they're the right matching synergy to be able to land in with.
Yeah, I'd say that sounds very accurate.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
It's so helpful with these different pieces, because especially when we have a little bit of awareness, we can kind of see like, oh, this is somebody who'll come right up into your field and they'll just connect right in. And
Yeah.
versus, you know, being able to see like, oh, this person actually needs some time to
Yeah.
tether and to get used to how somebody feels or how somebody operates, to kind of synergize and to be able to just get that space of a better read before being able to drop in. Or it's more like, rather than diving into the water, it's a slow wading into the water. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
100%.
I'm feeling very impromptuous, because there's things that I want to see where you want to go, but then it's taking me right away into a place.
Yeah, go. I love it. Go for it.
Okay, so I'm gonna go here. The next piece, and because it synergizes with this element of that little bit of needing distance and space, just to read and to be able to feel who different people are before fully engaging. It can sometimes come across for some people like, oh, that person's quite, you know, they hold a lot of distance. And so again, it's being able to actually understand the deeper inner reasons why we operate the way we do, and to actually be able to move away from sometimes the judgments, or sometimes um, the understanding of why something's happening, and having more critical awareness to it. So more critical analysis work to it. So your name itself, and I'm going to just focus on one key quality, one key trait, is all names have vibrational frequencies to them. And your name on the external side of how you operate is actually under a 9. And so what that means is you're going to be someone who feels everything on the deepest level that you can in regards to all the different frequencies that are out there. You're going to be more attuned, almost like when you think of, you know, stringing an instrument. It's like you feel the vibrations of everyone that comes into your field. You're picking up on things on a much deeper level than what most people will be able to pick up on. So there is almost a need to be able to create a bit of a buffer to integrate and digest the emotional impacts that you feel by having contact with different people.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
And it, you know, it took me a long time to realize that not everybody, I've always obviously, you know, like most people do, interpret things through a lens of the way that they see the world. They assume that everybody else sees and has the same kind of experience and is interacting with the same feelings behind it. And it took me a long time to realize that that wasn't the case. But yeah, I'm super sensitive, very empathic actually, and it's I think it's great, but it's got its drawbacks for sure. Yeah.
Definitely. And you completely nailed the what's that saying? Nailing the nail on the head.
Yeah, hitting the nail on the head.
Hitting the nail on the head. That we growing up, we don't realize, or we're not, a lot of the time, most, you know, we don't usually come, most of us, from conscious households where there's this, you know, a deeper level of spiritual understanding, or I'd say metaphysical attunement to what it looks like to be walking our lives. So that natural component of, you know, we see our world and we expect the rest of the world to see through the same lens that we do, and vice versa. Everybody is experiencing their world and having a hard time understanding why different people do things the way that they do, or how they operate in these different ways, because our lens still hasn't been kind of cracked open to a bigger perspective that we're all walking in such different aspects of journeys, and we're all almost like in our own little worlds and bubbles in ways that
Yeah,
that they're just separate and
yeah,
singular in many ways. Yeah.
for sure. And that, in these days, the way I interpret that is really like that's part of what we're here to do. We're actually here to be separate from one another.
Yes.
In on a being a human being level. When you think about it from a spiritual perspective, that's how I see it now. Like we are here to experience that separation, and then how do you create that bridge of like love and understanding, even though that it's so hard to understand one another, communicate.
Being able to drop into each other's worlds and actually be able to get a different lens and get curious
Yeah.
about how different people's worlds operate, and
Mm.
what the different people's truths are, right? What
Yeah.
conditionings have come into play to make us who we are, or the lens in which we see the world, or we operate from different parts of ourselves in the world.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And to even just strip all of that away and find a place where you're just still loving that person. Sometimes you don't even like them,
Hmm.
but you're still loving them. It's such a hard journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
But and I was going to say too about feeling, being an empathic person, is that can also be alarming sometimes, where you pick up emotions, and depending how you've been conditioned in your life, often the ones that you are the most sensitive to are the negative emotions
Mm.
you pick up from people, but without understanding, the background. And like especially as a younger person, just always feeling very sort of, which sort of explains my wariness when I enter a room, where I'm just like, okay, but often taking it personally when, it's only personal on a very surface level often.
Hmm. And as an empath, it's like a thought form could be coming through the
Yeah,
field. It's like you walk into the room and you can feel if the fight has just happened, or if
yeah,
there's
yeah,
there's some kind of emotional struggle that's going on in the room. And
yeah,
as empaths, it can feel like, oh, is this mine? Is it directed towards me?
totally.
That element of trying to separate
Yeah,
out that sensitivity
yeah,
level, because it's
yeah,
felt, right.
yeah,
It goes through the system as if it's our own emotion, as if
yeah,
it's our own
totally.
thought form that's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you also you have this on two levels as well too. The energy of the nine, which is that from 0 to 27, you were born under the influences coming into the earth. So we have different impressions that are coming into our world, and they're what form our experiences and what our soul is meant to go through. And so you've had major influences that have all been at this very, very high frequency. So without having that ability to understand that you're going to be at the most sensitive level, it can be very difficult to someone who's not empathically connected whatsoever to it's almost like night and day, like almost opposite qualities coming forward, because the nine is meant to be attuned to the bigger frequencies of life, to the poetic versions of what's taking place around us, to connecting into the humanitarian nature of ourselves, to wanting to make the world a better place, to seeing the injustices in this world. Like it's more of an attunement to that place. I have a 9 from 0 to 27 as well, so I fully,
Oh yeah,
yes. And
yeah,
being able to feel where there's anything, especially in a household growing up, being able to feel where there's issues going on in the household that can be under the surface that aren't being talked about, but it's being felt like a train going through the system. So it's like there's no separation behind what's not being spoken versus what is actually being felt, because that's actually coming through as threads of information going right into the system. Yeah. And one of the best things for anyone that has a lot of high 9 frequencies is there has to be a dynamic to really balance out that level of intuitiveness, that level of sensitivity. So whether it be going and knowing what are your pieces that really give back to yourself, like whether it's going to the ocean, whether it's having a musical instrument that you connect in with, whether it's nice Epsom salt, sea salt, essential oil baths, like whatever that is, to being able to bring one back into synergy on a consistent basis. Self-care for someone who has high nines is going to be stronger and more impactful than someone who has different frequencies in their name and in their life path.
Yeah. I find that's been always been a bit of a challenge for me, actually, because I tend to deal with it a couple of ways. I do projects, as you know.
Yeah.
Another project. So it's very distracting and I'm busy. Or I just I'm a little bit reclusive. Mm-hmm. I just stay in my house and walk my dog and, so it's it's not the best maybe coping mechanism, but yeah.
But it's definitely a way to almost detox. Like if you go out into a crowded space for, and you're around a lot of social interactions for the day, you probably need time school just to come back into center. And
I got very exhausted.
Yeah.
I got really tired. Yeah. So I kind of avoid those scenarios.
Mm-hmm. And even
especially now that I don't drink alcohol really anymore. That was a good crutch for a long time, But yeah.
Yes. Well, and being able to recognize, the crutch is there until we have sometimes more awareness or more tools, or we honor ourselves more, right? There's more of an element.
Yeah, definitely.
Honor the self, right? So also too with the 9, like there's a need to be able to process all the subtleties. So these things will bounce around in the mind quite a bit, and it's like until there's that space to be able to land in and have that integration time, there's a need to be able to understand things on a much deeper level. So a lot of other people kind of bounce through experiences and maybe are a little bit more on the surface of themselves. They don't need that integration time or that introspection time the same way as somebody who has dominant 9s in their frequency. Yeah.
Well, yeah, making a lot of sense to me. Definitely resonating with me. Yeah.
And I'm going to dive into one more before we finish our fun call today. This is so fun for me.
Me too, yeah.
It's so verifying, right? Like it's when we see ourselves or we're seen as ourselves, there's just such a level that can drop into place that I feel it gives us a chance to validate in certain ways our life path and have compassion and understanding to our life path. Taking away, sometimes those pieces where we can get hung up in like, why do I have to be like X, or why do I have to be like Y? That true self-love, being able to come in like, this is my life walk and my life path. This is what my soul has come here to experience and to go through, and to take oneself sometimes off the hook as well too. So it doesn't have to be so intensified in a certain way, but loving ourselves more on our personal walk. Yeah. Okay, so I have your natal chart here in front of me, and I feel like, because we've had some really powerful conversations in this last little while, I feel like I want to dive in a little bit into your K2 placement. So I know this came up in conversation, and I'm just going to touch on it today, but we can dive in deeper into it. So K2 represents, we have Rahu and we have K2, so it's also known as the North Node and the South Node. And so the North Node is the head of the body, and the K2 is from the neck down. And so K2 represents what we have accomplished, what we have focused on, what was our most dominant pieces that we were drawn to in our past life, in our most current past life. And usually our most current past life will be accumulation of a certain focus in a certain direction. So it's usually an accumulation of a few past lives that are interconnected, but it really, really holds that bearing of what we were most drawn to and what we achieved and what we were able to overturn in our last past life. And so it's a place of comfort to a certain degree. So being a place of comfort, it's like, I know this like I know the back of my hand. Like I know this like the neighborhood that I've lived in for 30 years. I know every nook and cranny of this place. So there's a draw to go there because it's comfortable, but then also the soul feels a little bit of like a repelling from that because it's like, no, 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 we've done this. And it's not where we're here to focus on because we're here to focus on something new and fresh. So so whenever we might have a trigger point happen in our life, or we might feel a little bit more challenged, we typically will drop back into our K2. We'll go back to where we're most comfortable, but then we can't stay there very long because it's like, no, 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 like I'm not getting anything from this. Like it's comfortable, it's familiar, I understand this, but it's not going to fulfill oneself. It almost feels like it's like playing that same record for the 25,000th time, right? So there's an element where we will pull out of that as well. So you do have different placements when it comes to your sidereal and your tropical chart. So tropical being the Western chart, sidereal being the Eastern chart. And I do like looking at both of them because there's different reference points and different reasons. Like the way my understanding and my experience has been, it's like understanding the self from coming through the front door of the house or understanding the self from coming through the back door of the house, and how both of those have a certain meaning or a way that they synergize. And so your K2 placement, and it makes sense to me with knowing, a bit about yourself and conversations we've had, is it's in the 8th house as well as it's in the 9th house. So the 8th house is very much the house of, it's a deep dive house. It's the house where Scorpio, it's the lord of the house. So it's where it naturally lives. So regardless on what sign is in that house, there's still the influence of Scorpio when we look at the 8th house. So the 8th house is all about deep diving. It's understanding things on a very profound level, a metaphysical level, an esoteric level. And esoteric means hidden sciences, the hidden nature of what really goes on in this life, and the hidden meanings of what really goes on behind the scenes. And so anything that is focused on has to go to the root. It can't stay on the surface. There's a depth of way of being that comes through when you look at the 8th house, and the dominant aspects that come forward to the way that one will naturally be in that influence. And then it's also influenced in the 9th house in your Eastern chart. And the 9th house is all about its wisdom teachings. It's the teachings of the Father. It's the teaching of like gurus and spiritual teachings, religious teachings. So it's all these elements that come through, usually through the masculine. It holds a masculine space, but it's teachings that have come through where there's been an enrichment that's happened and the soul has turned over a lot and it's grown quite a lot from what has happened in that time of being influenced in that space. And so where I see this for you, if I'm free flow to share, is we've had a lot of conversations around NDEs, so near death experiences. And with K2 being in these houses, a lot of the time it can be almost like a way of wanting to see life from a different position outside of what this life is bringing in. So when we think of near-death experiences, it's very much like what is outside of the earthly plane that's being experienced? What's outside of this human existence that we're in, and we're here to be experiencing what's beyond this experience. And with K2 placement there, it's going to bring in this piece of, I've been focusing on what's in this life. Now I'm drawn to understand what's outside of this life. So it's actually going to take you into an introspection place of wanting to discover things from a much richer place that can really tie up and explain a lot more about the human journey and the human walk here, outside of what we're tangibly experiencing here. So it brings in a very, very strong element. You also have Swati in your K2, which again, when we think we've got the head on one side, we've got the body on the other, those two are still connected, even though they're separated. So Ashwini is in your Rahu placement, which again is ruled by K2. So you have this dual K2 element that's coming in when we think of how what your focus is in this life, what the pull and the draw is, almost like a thirst that can't be quenched. There's this draw and this pull. And it comes in from a position where these forms of understanding are going to want to really come in and dovetail into your life. There's so much more I could say on this topic, but I want to be careful to not go too long in the call today. But um, your Rahu placement definitely also curtails into the roots and the desire that are also happening to why you have the desires you do and the type of business and adventures that you've gone into as well in this life. So I'll maybe stop it there because I want to bounce into so many different things, but I just wanted to allow myself just to drop into 3 today because I could definitely continue to go. But what we'll do is we'll have tea and we'll drop in further. But yeah, just it's a fun exploration today to look at 3 core things that stand out, that jump out immediately as soon as I see your chart.
I love it. That's really cool. I'd love to learn more.
Yeah. Beautiful. So thank you so much for exploring with me today. And obviously this is a big, it's a big topic for myself. It's something I'm very passionate about. So I'm going to continue to do these fun explorations that was inspired to come through. So people can reach out to me if they want to go through a little bit of an exploration. And of course, I do full journey work on this. I also do the top 10 core things that really stand out in a chart that's going to bring in awareness that's going to be very helpful. Even looking at, say, our vocation chart, what's really helpful for us to understand and what our true path is in this lifetime, what our true journey is in this lifetime, what we're here to really turn over. So yes, it is definitely one of my strong passions. So I want to thank you, Claudine, for being my first person for stepping up and wanting to play with me today. And
yeah, fun.
I'm doing a little bit of work out of Claudine's space as well too right now. I've transitioned into coming that direction for doing a lot of my one-on-one work. And so we're having more playtime and more connection time, which I'm very grateful for.
You too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Katja.
Thank you. So much love for the rest of your night. And thank you for playing with me today.
No.
Mwah.